Torchlight danced across salt-stained shields as Norse raiders descended upon the Saxon shore. Among them stood Bjorn, the Jarl's heir, his sword unbloodied, for tonight would mark his first raid. But fate had other plans. When his father's men dragged a wounded Saxon girl aboard their longship, her defiant eyes met his across the blood-soaked deck. In that moment, something stirred in Bjorn's heart, an honor older than the sagas themselves, against his father's. Fury against centuries of Viking lore, he chose to save her. Through mist-shrouded fjords and ancient groves, two souls from warring worlds would forge a bond that could unite their peoples, or tear them apart forever. But could love truly bridge the chasm between Saxon and Norse? Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. Dawn broke over the fjord, painting the longhouses weathered, timbers in hues of amber and gold. Bjorn stood at the water's edge, his father's ancient warhorn heavy in his hands. The carved dragon's head that formed its mouth had witnessed generations of raids, its brass surface worn smooth by the grip of Jarls who had come before. His father, Jarl Eric Bloodaxe, had pressed it into his palms at first light, his weathered face stern with expectation. "Today you become a man," the Jarl had declared, his voice carrying across the morning mist. "Tonight we raid." The words should have filled Bjorn with pride, but instead they settled like stones in his stomach. He ran his fingers along the horn's intricate runes, protection, victory, glory, wondering if they could read the doubt in his heart. From the hilltop above, smoke rose from the great hall where the raiders gathered. The clash of steel on steel rang out as men sharpened their weapons, their laughter and boasts carrying on the wind. Among them would be Sigurd One-Eye, his father's most trusted warrior, who had taught Bjorn to wield a sword when he was barely tall enough to lift one. But it was his mother's words from the previous night that echoed loudest in his mind. Astrid, the wise they called her, for she had the sight of the Völva, the seers of old. "The raids bring wealth," she had whispered as she braided his hair for battle, "but at what cost to the soul?" Bjorn turned the horn over in his hands, studying his reflection in its polished surface. At 20 summers, he had his father's height, and his mother's thoughtful eyes. The intricate tattoos that marked him as the Jarl's heir wound up his arms like serpents, each one earned through trials of strength and wisdom. Yet he felt more kinship with the books and scrolls he secretly studied than with the axes and swords that lined the longhouse walls. A heavy hand fell on his shoulder. "Lost in thought again, young wolf?" Sigurd One-Eye's scarred face split in a grin. "Save the thinking for the scolds. Tonight is for glory." Bjorn forced a smile, though his heart wasn't in it. "Just practicing." "My war cry, old bear." Sigurd laughed, a sound like stones in a storm. "Practice less, do more. Your father worries you spend too much time with those Christian scrolls the traders bring. A Jarl's son should think of plunder, not parchment." The mention of his father sobered Bjorn further. Eric Bloodaxe had built their settlement into the most prosperous in the fjord through strength and cunning. The heavy golden arm rings that marked his status had all been won in raid and battle. He expected no less from his only son and heir. As if summoned by these thoughts, Eric's commanding voice boomed across the water. "To the great hall! We plan tonight's raid." Bjorn gripped the war horn tighter and turned toward the hall. Inside, shields lined the walls, trophies from 100 raids. The great hearth fire cast dancing shadows across faces, eager for blood and glory. His father stood before the flames, massive and battle-scarred, his grey-streaked beard braided, with golden beads that clinked as he spoke. "The Saxon coast lies undefended," Eric declared, pointing to a roughly drawn map. "Their warriors are inland, fighting Wessex's battles. Their monasteries are fat with gold, their villages ripe for plunder." His eyes found Bjorn's. "Tonight, my son leads his first raid. The gods themselves will watch to see if he proves worthy of his blood." A cheer went up from the gathered warriors, but Bjorn barely heard it. He was watching the flames, seeing in them not glory, but the burning homes of people who had never wronged him. Yet to refuse would shame not only himself, but every ancestor whose deeds were sung in the great sagas. The day passed in a blur of preparation. Women wrapped bread and dried meat for the journey. Warriors checked their weapons and armor. Bjorn moved among them, accepting their advice and blessings, feeling more like an actor in a play than a raid leader. As dusk approached, he stood at the prow of his father's longship, the war horn at his belt. The oarsmen took their places, their faces painted for battle. His father stepped aboard last, resplendent in mail and furs. "Sound the horn," Eric commanded. "Let all know that the wolves of the north hunt tonight." Bjorn raised the ancient horn to his lips. As he drew breath to blow, he caught his mother's eye on the shore. In that moment he saw not pride, but sorrow, as if she already knew what fate had in store. The horn's deep bellow echoed across the fjord, calling the raiders to war, and calling Bjorn to a destiny he could not yet imagine. The morning mist clung to the Saxon coastline like a mother's worried embrace. Ethelflaed moved through her herb garden, each step deliberate as she gathered the day's remedies. Her fingers brushed lovingly against the stems of yarrow, feverfew and chamomile, friends she knew as intimately as family. The woven basket at her hip already held bundles of dried herbs, each wrapped carefully in linen and labelled with marks only she could read. "Still at your gathering, sister?" Her brother Edwin's voice carried across the garden wall. "The tide's coming in. Father says the fishing will be good today." Ethelflaed straightened, tucking a loose strand of golden hair behind her ear. "The fishing is always good when Father says it will be." She smiled, though her heart carried a strange heaviness this morning. But someone must tend to the village's hurts while you're all at sea. At 19 summers, she had already earned a reputation as a skilled healer. The knowledge had been passed down from her mother, who had learned it from her mother before her, going back to the times before the Christ priests came with their Latin books and stone churches. Some whispered that such knowledge was dangerous for a Christian woman to hold, but even the village priest came to her when his joints ached in winter. She bent to cut a sprig of rosemary, its sharp scent clearing her mind. The bundle of herbs at her belt was more than just plants. It was a legacy, a connection to the wisdom of countless women who had tended these same gardens, watched these same shores. "The Danes have been quiet this season," Edwin remarked, leaning on his spear. At 16, he already stood guard duty with the men, though their village hadn't seen raiders in years. "Perhaps they've finally learned to fear Saxon steel." Ethelflaed shook her head, remembering the stories their grandmother had told. "They're like the tide, brother. They may retreat, but they always return." Inside her small healing house, shelves lined the walls, each holding carefully labeled pots and bundles. She began sorting the morning's harvest, her movements practiced and precise. The healing house had been her mother's before the fever took her 2 winters past, and sometimes Ethelflaed still caught herself turning to ask questions only silence could answer. A knock at the door interrupted her work. "Come in," she called, recognizing the halting step of old Emma, the fisherman's widow. "It's my joints again, dear one," Emma said, easing onto a wooden stool. "They speak of storms coming." Ethelflaed reached for her special salve, the one made with willow bark and meadow sweet. As she worked it into Emma's gnarled hands, the old woman's eyes grew distant. "I remember when your mother first learned to make this salve," Emma mused. "She was younger than you are now. We all thought her too young for such responsibility, but she proved us wrong, just as you have." A warmth bloomed in Ethelflaed's chest at the words. "I still have much to learn, perhaps." Emma flexed her fingers as the salve began to work. "But you have the gift, the knowing that goes beyond mere learning." Later, as the sun climbed toward noon, Ethelflaed walked the cliff path to gather more herbs. The sea stretched endlessly before her, its surface deceptively peaceful. Gulls wheeled and cried overhead, and for a moment everything seemed right with the world. Then she saw it, a flash of something on the horizon. A sail, perhaps, though it was gone too quickly to be sure. Her grandmother's words echoed in her memory. "Watch the horizon, child. The raiders come like wolves on the water, silent until the moment they strike." She hurried back to the village, her herb basket forgotten. The warning bell would need to be rung, the militia gathered. But even as she ran, she knew it might already be too late. The Vikings were known for their speed, their ability to strike before their victims could mount a defense. In the village square, life continued as normal. Women gathered at the well, children played in the dust, and the smell of baking bread filled the air. None of them had seen what she had seen. None of them felt the shadow of doom that had fallen across her heart. She found her father mending nets with the other fishermen. "Father," she said, trying to keep her voice steady, "I saw something on the horizon. A sail, I think." Aldwin the fisher looked up, his weathered face creasing with concern. He had always trusted his daughter's eyes, her instincts. "Are you certain?" "No," she admitted, "but grandmother always said, better to be wrong and prepared than right and surprised." He finished the familiar saying. Standing, he called to the other men, "To arms! Send the women and children to the church!" The village erupted into organized chaos. Ethelflaed rushed to her healing house, gathering what supplies she could. Her precious herb bundle seemed suddenly inadequate against the violence that might come, yet she tucked it securely in her belt. If there were to be injuries, she would need every remedy at her disposal. The church bell began to toll, not the gentle call to prayer, but the frantic warning that meant danger. Ethelflaed's hands shook as she worked, but her mind remained clear. Whatever came, she would face it with the strength of her forebears, the wisdom of her mother, and the courage that ran in her Saxon blood. As she stepped outside, the first rays of sunset painted the sky blood red. In the distance, black shapes appeared on the horizon, not one sail, but many. The wolves were indeed coming, and this time there would be no escape. The longships cut through the darkening waters like wolves through shadow. Bjorn stood at the prow, watching the Saxon village grow larger with each passing moment. Smoke rose from cooking fires, and he could make out figures running along the shoreline. They had been spotted. The warning bells began to toll. "They know we're coming," Sigurd growled. "But it matters not. Their warriors are away, fighting Wessex's battles." He spat into the sea. "Easy pickings." Bjorn's hand tightened on his sword hilt. The blade had belonged to his grandfather, its pattern-welded steel marked with runes of victory. But victory over what? Fishermen, women, children? The thought turned his stomach. His father's voice boomed across the waves. "Remember, boy, first, blood marks the warrior." The other raiders took up the cry, their voices carrying across the water like ravens' calls. The first arrow whistled past Bjorn's ear, splashing harmlessly into the sea. A few Saxon defenders had gathered on the beach, their shields forming a pitiful wall. Among them, Bjorn spotted a flash of golden hair, a woman holding not a weapon, but what looked like a healer's satchel. The longship's keels scraped sand. With practiced precision, the raiders leaped into the shallow water, shields raised against the sparse arrow fire. Bjorn followed, the cold sea soaking his boots. His father's war horn sounded deep and terrible, and the Vikings charged. The Saxon shield wall broke almost immediately. Bjorn found himself face to face with a fisherman wielding a spear. Terror in the man's eyes. Their weapons met with a clash of steel, and the fisherman's spear went flying. But as Bjorn raised his sword for the killing blow, he hesitated. The man took advantage of the moment to flee. "Weak!" Sigurd shouted, cutting down a Saxon defender. "Strike true, or your father's name means nothing!" The village had erupted into chaos. Flames leaped from thatched roofs, and screams filled the air. A broken Saxon shield lay in the bloodied sand, its surface painted with a crude cross. Near it, the golden-haired woman knelt beside a wounded defender, her hands steady as she worked, despite the battle raging around her. Then Bjorn saw his father's men advancing on her position. The wounded man tried to rise in her defense, but collapsed. The woman stood, placing herself between the raiders and her patient, her herb bundle still clutched protectively at her belt. "This one's pretty," one of the raiders laughed, grabbing for her arm. "She'll fetch a good price at the slave markets." Something snapped inside Bjorn. Before he knew what he was doing, he had stepped forward. "Leave her!" The raiders turned, surprised to hear their leader's son speak against them. The woman's eyes met his, not with fear, but with a fierce defiance that stirred something in his soul. "She's a healer," Bjorn said, thinking quickly. "We need one aboard, for the wounded." The words sounded hollow even to his own ears. But his father's men hesitated, looking to each other uncertainly. The moment shattered as Eric Bloodaxe's voice thundered across the beach. "Take what you can carry, burn the rest, let them remember the wolves of the north." The raiders grabbed the woman roughly, ignoring her struggles. Bjorn watched helplessly as they dragged her toward the ships, her herb bundle spilling onto the bloody sand. Without thinking, he scooped it up, tucking it into his cloak. More villagers fled toward the stone church, its bell still tolling desperately. Bjorn found himself moving as if in a dream, neither helping nor hindering the raid. He watched as his people loaded their ships with plunder, gold from the church, food from the storehouses, and slaves bound for northern markets. The woman was forced aboard his father's ship, her healing supplies scattered across the beach. She maintained her dignity even in captivity, her head held high as she was bound to the mast. Their eyes met again across the deck, and in that moment, Bjorn knew he could never be the same. "A good first raid!" His father clapped him on the shoulder, either not noticing or choosing to ignore his son's lack of bloodshed. "Though you must learn to strike harder next time. A warrior's blade should never hesitate." As they pushed off from the shore, Bjorn looked back at the burning village. The church bell had finally fallen silent. The broken shield on the beach grew smaller and smaller until it was just another dark spot on a darkening shore. The woman began to sing softly, a Christian prayer perhaps, though Bjorn couldn't understand the words. One of the raiders raised his hand to strike her silent, but Bjorn intercepted his arm. "She's under my protection," he declared, surprising himself as much as the others. "By my right, as the Jarl's son." His father's eyes narrowed from the stern, but he said nothing. The other raiders muttered among themselves, but dared not challenge him openly. The woman's song had stopped, but her eyes remained fixed on Bjorn, measuring him. As the longship cut through the waves toward home, Bjorn felt the weight of his grandfather's sword at his hip. It seemed heavier now, laden with questions he had never thought to ask. He touched the herb bundle hidden in his cloak, its foreign scents mixing with the familiar smell of salt and tar. The raid was over, but something else was just beginning. In saving her, he had set them both on a path that would challenge everything he had ever known. The old sagas spoke of fate, wired, that bound all men. Perhaps this was his, written not in glory and blood, but in mercy and defiance. Thunder growled in the distance, and the first drops of rain began to fall. Night wrapped the fjord in shadow as the raiders' longships approached their home waters. In the dim light of the ship's single lantern, Bjorn studied the Saxon healers. A face, though bound, she sat straight-backed against the mast, her eyes following the coastline as if committing every curve to memory. The other captives huddled together, weeping softly, but she remained apart, silent and watchful. Bjorn's fingers traced the edges of the map he had stolen from his father's sea chest. Its parchment was worn soft with age, marked with secret. Paths through the fjords that only the most trusted raiders knew, paths that might offer escape if he dared to use them. His decision crystallized as he watched one of the raiders kick a captive who had been sick over the side of the ship. The casual cruelty twisted something in his gut. This was not the honor his mother had taught him, not the wisdom she said a true leader must possess. He waited until the moon passed behind thick clouds, then moved casually toward the mast where the Saxon woman was bound. Their eyes met in the darkness, and he pressed a finger to his lips. She gave an almost imperceptible nod. "I'll take first watch over the slaves," Bjorn announced to the crew. "Get some rest. We'll need fresh arms for unloading tomorrow." The raiders grunted their approval. None of them wanted the tedious duty of guarding captives. Even his father, standing proud at the stern, simply nodded, Why would he suspect his own son, his heir, of treachery? Bjorn waited until the men had settled, their breathing growing heavy with exhaustion and mead. Then, with movements practiced since childhood, he began, loosening the Saxon woman's bonds. "If you scream," he whispered in broken Saxon, learned from traders, "we both die." She responded in Norse, her accent thick but understandable. "I am no fool, Viking." The surprise must have shown on his face, for she added, "I learn what I need to survive." Her bonds fell away. Bjorn helped her to her feet, steadying her as she fought off the numbness in her limbs. He pressed his spare knife into her hands, a risk, but one he had to take if he wanted to earn her trust. "There's a small boat," he breathed, nodding toward the stern. "When I give the signal," a grunt from one of the sleeping raiders made them both freeze. But the man merely turned over, pulling his cloak tighter against the chill. They worked quickly in the darkness, preparing the small boat that hung from the ship's side. Bjorn had chosen his father's ship deliberately. It was the only one that carried such a craft, used for scouting shallow waters. Now it would serve a different purpose. The Saxon woman touched his arm, pointing. Through the darkness, they could see the fjord narrowing, high cliffs rising on either side. This was their chance. The ships would have to slow to navigate the channel. Bjorn unfolded the stolen map, its surface barely visible in the faint moonlight. A hidden passage lay ahead, marked in faded ink, a narrow channel that cut behind a series of small islands. If they could reach it unseen, the first ray of false dawn was beginning to lighten the sky when Bjorn made his move. As the ship slowed for the channel, he and the Saxon woman lowered the boat with barely a splash, the fog rolling in off. The water helped conceal their descent. They were halfway down when a shout went up from the bow. "The prisoners! The woman is loose!" Bjorn's heart lurched. They dropped the remaining distance, the boat hitting the water hard enough to spray them both. He helped the Saxon woman in, then jumped aboard himself, already reaching for the oars. "After them!" his father's voice roared above. "No one escapes the wolves of the north." Arrows began to splash around them, but the fog and darkness made accuracy impossible. Bjorn pulled hard on the oars, guiding them toward the hidden channel. Behind them, he could hear the confusion as the larger ships tried to turn in the narrow fjord. The Saxon woman had taken up the spare oar, matching his rhythm as if she'd done this all her life. "You'll be counted a traitor," she said between strokes. "I already am one," he replied, guiding them into the shadow of the first island. The stolen map showed the way, a narrow space between rocky outcrops that larger ships couldn't navigate. More shouts echoed across the water, but they were already entering the hidden channel. Bjorn felt the current catch them, pulling them deeper into the maze of islands and fog. The voices of his people grew fainter, replaced by the soft sound of water against stone. When they finally stopped to rest, the sun had risen fully, though the fog still sheltered them. They could hear distant calls as the search continued, but the sounds came from the main channel. None had found the secret passage. The Saxon woman was examining her herb bundle, which Bjorn had grabbed before their escape. Her hands trembled slightly as she checked each packet and pouch. "Why?" she asked suddenly, looking up at him. "Why help me?" Bjorn studied the map, buying time to find the right words. "Because," he began, then stopped. How could he explain what he barely understood? Himself. "Because it was right," he finally said. She was quiet for a long moment, then said, "I am called Ethelflaed." "Bjorn," he replied, though she likely already knew his name from the raids. "Well, Bjorn," she said, a hint of grim humor in her voice, "I hope you know these waters as well as this map suggests, because your father's men will not stop hunting us." He nodded, already plotting their course through the maze of islands. They would need to find shelter soon, food, fresh water, and after that, they would have to figure out how a Viking heir and a Saxon healer could survive in a world that would see them both dead. The fog began to lift, revealing the steep cliffs of the fjord rising around them like ancient giants. Somewhere ahead lay sanctuary, if they could find it. Somewhere ahead lay a future neither of them could have imagined when the sun set the day before. The hidden cove provided shelter as the sun climbed higher, its entrance obscured by a curtain of hanging vines. Bjorn guided their small boat onto a narrow strip of pebbly beach, his muscles aching from hours of rowing. Ethelflaed helped him pull the craft deeper into cover, her movements sure, despite her exhaustion. As they made camp in the shallow cave behind the beach, Bjorn produced a smooth stone from his pouch, its surface covered in delicate runes. It had been his mother's first gift to him, a teaching stone used to learn the ancient letters that held both meaning and magic. "Your words," he said in halting Saxon, then switched to Norse. "Your Norse is better than my Saxon. We should speak more, learn each other's tongues." He held out the stone. "This was how I learned my letters." Ethelflaed took the stone carefully, her healer's hands tracing the carved symbols. "Each mark has meaning. Each has many meanings." Bjorn moved closer, pointing to a particular rune. "Ansus, the god's breath, wisdom, communication." His finger moved to another. "Rideho, the journey, the wheel, the right path." She studied the marks intently. "We have our own letters, but these—" She traced one of the symbols. "These feel older somehow, like the herbs I gather. Each one tells a story if you know how to read it." They spent the morning exchanging words, drawing in the sand when their vocabulary failed them. Ethelflaed proved a quick study, her healer's memory adapting easily to new knowledge. In turn, she taught him Saxon words for healing herbs and Christian prayers, though he struggled with the softer sounds of her language. "Your father," she said during a pause, her voice careful. "He will not stop searching." Bjorn nodded, running his thumb over the runes. "No, the Jarl cannot allow such a challenge to go unanswered, even from his son, especially from his son." "Why did you do it?" she asked again, but differently this time, not demanding, but seeking understanding. "You had everything, heir to a powerful Jarl, respected by your people." He was quiet for a long moment, watching the play of light on water at the cave's entrance. "We have a word, weird, fate, destiny, but more than that, the pattern that connects all things." He touched the runestone. "When I saw you on that beach, tending the wounded even as battle raged, something spoke to my word, something older than raids or blood feuds. We call it God's will," she replied, touching the small wooden cross at her neck. "Though I suspect your gods and mine might disagree on many things." "Perhaps," Bjorn smiled slightly. "Yet here we are, speaking across that divide." A comfortable silence fell between them as they shared the dried meat and bread Bjorn had managed to grab during their escape. The sound of waves echoed softly through the cave, a rhythmic pulse like the world's heartbeat. "Tell me of your people," Ethelflaed said suddenly. "Not the raids and battles, the other things, the stories you tell, the songs you sing." So Bjorn spoke of the great sagas, of gods and giants, of heroes and monsters. He told her of Odin's wisdom and Thor's strength, of Freya's beauty and Loki's cunning. As he spoke, he used the runes to illustrate his tales, showing how each symbol connected to the stories. In turn, she told him of her Christ, of saints and miracles, of a God who valued mercy above sacrifice. She spoke of healing lore passed down through generations of women, of herbs that could mend both body and spirit. "Your Christian priests," Bjorn said, "they say our gods are demons, that we are heathens to be converted or killed. And your people say we are weak, that our God makes us soft." She met his eyes. "Yet I have seen kindness in a Viking's heart, and you have seen strength in a Saxon's spirit." Their conversation was interrupted by distant shouts. Search parties, though, still far off. They quickly gathered their belongings, preparing to move deeper into the fjord's maze. As they pushed the boat back into the water, Ethelflaed paused, looking at the rune stone still in her hand. She tried to return it, but Bjorn closed her fingers around it. "Keep it," he said. "Let it be a bridge between our worlds." She tucked it carefully into her herb bundle. "Then teach me more as we travel. If we are to survive together, we must understand each other." They set off, as the sun began its westward journey, staying close to the shadowed cliffs. Bjorn pointed out landmarks, teaching her their Norse names, while she shared Saxon songs to pass the time, singing softly so as not to echo off the fjord walls. The runestone had become more than just a teaching tool. Like them, it was a thing. Between worlds, Norse magic carrying Saxon words, ancient wisdom speaking new truths. As they navigated the secret ways of the fjord, they were also finding a path between their cultures, word by word, story by story. The day waned, and still they heard occasional distant calls of searching parties. But now they had something. Beyond mere flight, they had understanding, slowly growing like a seed in spring soil. It wasn't much, perhaps, but it was a beginning. As dusk approached, Bjorn found them another hidden anchorage. Before they slept, Ethelflaed took out the runestone one last time, her finger tracing the symbol for journey, Raidho. The right path, she whispered in careful Norse. The right path, Bjorn agreed in Saxon. And in the growing darkness, both languages sounded equally true. Dawn found them in a sheltered inlet, where ancient pines grew down to the water's edge. Bjorn had pushed them hard through the night, knowing his father's men would not rest in their pursuit. Now, as he helped Ethelflaed secure the boat, the wound he'd been hiding since their escape finally made itself known. His sharp intake of breath didn't escape her notice. "You're hurt," she said, no question in her voice. "Show me." "It's nothing," he started to say, but she fixed him with a healer's stern gaze that transcended their cultural divide. From her herb bundle, she withdrew a cloth that made Bjorn pause. Even in the dim light, he could see it was no ordinary linen. Intricate patterns were stitched along its edges in silver thread, crosses interwoven with spirals that reminded him of Norse designs. The cloth seemed to hold both their worlds in its weave. "My mother's healing cloth," Ethelflaed explained, seeing his interest. "Each woman in our line has added to its patterns, stitched her knowledge into its fabric." Her fingers traced one of the designs. "This spiral speaks of renewal. The cross beside it, divine healing. Together, they are stronger than either alone." Bjorn slowly removed his leather armor, revealing a deep gash along his ribs, a parting gift from one of his father's men during their escape. The wound had reopened during their night of rowing, leaving his tunic stained with blood. Ethelflaed's professional manner couldn't quite hide her concern. "This needs proper tending, or fever will follow." She began laying out her healing. Supplies on the sacred cloth, each in its proper place. "Why didn't you speak of this sooner?" "There wasn't time," he said, then admitted, "and I wasn't sure you would want to help." Her hands stilled. "You saved me from slavery. Possibly worse. Did you think I would repay that with indifference to your suffering?" "I am still the enemy," he reminded her. "A Viking." "No," she said softly, beginning to clean the wound with water from her flask. "You are Bjorn, who defied his father to do what was right. That is who I choose to heal." The touch of the sacred cloth against his skin was cool and soothing. Ethelflaed worked with quiet efficiency, washing the wound before applying a poultice of herbs she had managed to keep dry during their flight. Her fingers were gentle but sure, speaking of years of practice. "My mother taught me that healing is a sacred trust," she said as she worked. "When someone places their life in your hands, it doesn't matter who they are or where they come from. In that moment, they are simply human, in need of care." Bjorn watched her hands move, seeing how she whispered prayers, some Christian, some older, over each herb before applying it. "We have healers too," he said, "but they are different. They deal in runes and spirits as much as herbs." "Perhaps not so different," she smiled slightly. "What are prayers but another kind of rune magic? What are herbs but spirits taking physical form?" She began wrapping the wound with strips torn from the sacred cloth. "My grandmother used to say that all healing comes from the same source, whatever name we give it." The pain began to ease as the herbs did their work. Bjorn found himself relaxing despite their precarious situation. There was something profound in this moment. A Viking warrior allowing himself to be vulnerable before a Saxon healer, their usual roles reversed. "Tell me about your mother," he said, partly to distract himself from the sting of the herbs, partly because he genuinely wanted to know. Ethelflaed's hands maintained their steady rhythm as she spoke. "She was the wisest woman I knew. She taught me that true healing isn't just about mending the body. It's about understanding the soul that dwells within." Her voice softened. "We lost her to fever 2 winters ago. I had all the knowledge she gave me, but I couldn't save her." "I'm sorry," Bjorn said, and meant it. "It's hard, being the one left behind." "Your mother," she said carefully, tying off the bandage. "You speak of her differently than your father. She taught you more than just runes, didn't she?" Bjorn nodded. "She's a völva, a seer. She taught me that true strength isn't always found in the swing of a sword. Sometimes it's in knowing when not to swing." He touched the bandage gently. "Like now." A comfortable silence fell between them as Ethelflaed packed away her supplies, carefully folding what remained of the sacred cloth. The morning sun had risen higher, warming the inlet's protected waters. "We should rest here today," she said. "That wound needs time to start healing properly." Bjorn started to protest, but she held up a hand. "A healer's authority trumps even a Jarl's son, at least in matters of health. We'll make better progress if you're not bleeding with every stroke of the oar." He couldn't help but smile at her. Firmness, as the healer commands. They made a small camp carefully hidden from the water. As Bjorn finally allowed himself to truly rest, he watched Ethelflaed sort through her herbs in the dappled sunlight. The sacred cloth lay beside her, its silver threads catching the light like stars. "Thank you," he said quietly. She looked, up understanding in her eyes. "We help each other now. It's the only way either of us will survive." The day passed peacefully, marked by the sun's movement through the pines and the gentle lapping of water against the shore. They spoke more, sharing stories of their childhoods, finding surprising commonalities in their different worlds. The healing cloth lay between them like a bridge, its intertwined patterns a testament to the possibility of unity in difference. As evening approached, Bjorn tested his wound and found the pain greatly diminished. Ethelflaed's skills were as real as any rune magic he had ever seen. Perhaps, he thought, watching her prepare a poultice for the next day's journey, this was its own kind of wired. 2 healers of different kinds, helping each other find a new way forward. Evening mist rose from the fjord waters like spirits awakening. Their small boat lay hidden in a grove of ancient birch trees, their silver bark gleaming in the fading light. Bjorn sat at the water's edge, carefully unwrapping a small, round object from its oilskin covering, a hand drum, its reindeer hide, surface decorated with symbols in sacred red ochre. Ethelflaed, gathering kindling nearby, paused at the sight. "I've seen such drums before," she said quietly. "In the hands of your raiders. They played them before attacks." "This is different," Bjorn replied, his fingers tracing the painted symbols. "This is my mother's drum, a spirit drum, not for war, but for seeing, for walking between worlds." He looked up at her. "Tonight is a holy night for my people. The spirits are close." She settled beside him, her curiosity overcoming any lingering wariness. "Like All Hallows' Eve, in my faith, perhaps," he smiled slightly, "though I doubt. Your priests would approve of the comparison." The drum's surface caught the last rays of sunlight, illuminating its intricate designs. A world tree, spirit animals, pathways between realms. At its center, a spiral drew the eye inward, suggesting depths beyond the physical. "My mother gave me this in secret," Bjorn explained, his voice low with memory. "She said sometimes a warrior must learn to fight with weapons the sword cannot." "Touch!" His fingers found the drum's edge. Would you like to learn its voice?" Ethelflaed hesitated, touching the cross at her neck. "Would that not be sacrilege? Does your God forbid understanding others' ways?" he asked gently. "The drum speaks of things older than both our faiths, the voice of earth and sky, the songs of ancestors who walked these shores before either cross or Thor's hammer marked them." After a moment's thought, she nodded. "Show me." Bjorn demonstrated the basic rhythm, a slow, steady heartbeat that seemed to echo the pulse of the fjord itself. Ethelflaed watched intently as his hands moved, creating patterns of sound that made the mist dance around them. "The drum speaks in 4 voices," he explained, "like the 4 directions, the 4 seasons, the 4 elements that shape all things." He guided her hands to the drum's surface. "Feel its skin. It was given freely by the reindeer, prepared with prayers and offerings. Every part of it has meaning." Ethelflaed's healer's hands explored the drum's texture, sensing the care that had gone into its making. "These marks," she said, tracing a particular pattern, "they remind me of the herbs I gather, how each has its season, its proper time." "Yes." Bjorn nodded, encouraged by her insight. "Everything is connected in the great web of Fjord. The drum helps us see those connections, feel them in our bones." As darkness deepened, he began to play in earnest. The rhythm started slowly, like a sleeping giant's heart, then gradually quickened. Mist swirled around them, taking shapes that seemed almost human in the growing dark. Ethelflaed found herself swaying slightly to the rhythm, her breath synchronizing with the drum's voice. "It's like when I'm gathering herbs in the sacred places," she whispered, "when everything seems more alive, more aware. The veil between worlds grows thin," Bjorn agreed, his hands never stopping their steady rhythm. "Listen, not with your ears, but with your heart." And she did listen. Through the drum's voice, she began to hear other sounds, the ancient song of the fjord, the whispered memories of the stones, the quiet wisdom of the birch trees. It was not so different, she realized, from the deep silence of her church when the last echoes of prayers had faded. Bjorn began to chant softly in Old Norse, words older than the Vikings themselves. Though she couldn't understand them, their meaning seemed to bypass her mind and speak directly to her spirit. Her own prayers rose to join them, Latin hymns, merging with Norse Gulder in the misty air. The drum's rhythm shifted, became more complex. Bjorn's voice rose and fell like waves on a shore, and Ethelflaed found herself remembering fragments of songs her grandmother had sung, songs that belonged to the time before the Christ priests came, when the old gods still walked British shores. "The spirits are listening," Bjorn said softly between beats. "They know we seek a new path." As if in response, the mist around them thickened, taking on shapes that seemed to dance to the drum's voice. Ethelflaed saw figures that might have been Norse gods or Christian saints, their forms blending and shifting in the darkness. "I see them," she whispered, her voice filled with wonder rather than fear. They're not what I expected." "They rarely are," Bjorn smiled, the drum's rhythm beginning to slow. "The truth is always more complex than what we're taught to believe." As the final beats faded into silence, they sat together in the darkness, watching the mist slowly dissipate. The experience had changed something between them. Some barrier had dissolved like morning frost in sunlight. "Your mother," Ethelflaed said finally, "she must be a remarkable woman to understand such deep things." "As was yours," Bjorn replied, carefully rewrapping the drum, "to raise a daughter who could see beyond the fears we're taught." They slept that night beneath the birch trees, the drum safely stored between them. Their dreams were filled with strange visions, Norse gods wearing crosses, Christian saints carrying Thor's hammer, and through it all, the steady heartbeat of the drum, calling them toward a future neither could fully see, but both could feel approaching. In the morning, they would return to their flight, to the practical concerns of survival. But something had shifted in their understanding of each other. The drum's song had shown them possibilities their peoples had forgotten, the ancient unity that existed before divisions of faith and culture drew their sharp lines across the world. The spirits of the fjord had heard their song, had witnessed their willingness to learn each other's truths. Whether this would be enough to protect them in the days ahead remained to be seen, but for now, in this grove of silver birches, two worlds had touched and found they were not so different after all. The morning fog clung stubbornly to the fjord as Bjorn and Ethelflaed prepared to leave their sanctuary. Neither spoke of the previous night's spiritual connection, But something had shifted between them, a deeper understanding that needed no words. Their peace shattered with the distant sound of oars cutting water. Bjorn's head snapped up, his body tensing. "Too many oars," he whispered. "A full ship." They scrambled to hide their small boat, but before they could, a familiar voice carried across the water. "Brother, I know you're here." Bjorn froze. Eric? Impossible, he supposed, to be raiding in the north. Through the thinning fog emerged a longship. At its helm, a man who could have been Bjorn's twin, but for eyes that held none of his brother's warmth. Eirik Halfblood, their father's bastard son, raised in secret and trained as his hidden blade. From her herb bundle, Ethelflaed withdrew something that glinted dully in the morning light. A silver coin she'd found in their boat the previous day, marked with a distinctive scratch she now recognized. "They've been tracking us," she breathed. "This is no coincidence." Bjorn took the coin, his face darkening as he recognized the mark. "A betrayer's coin. Someone's been marking our path." His eyes met hers. "Someone who knew which channels we'd take." The longship drew closer, Eric's laughter echoing off the fjord walls. "Father sends his regards, little brother, and a choice. Surrender the Saxon witch now, and you might yet earn forgiveness." "Witch?" Ethelflaed's voice was sharp with surprise. "Is that what they're calling me?" "They needed a reason," Bjorn said grimly. "A story to explain why the Jarl's true-born son would betray his people. Easier to blame Saxon witchcraft than question their own ways." More ships appeared through the fog. They were surrounded. Among the crews, Bjorn recognized faces he'd known since childhood, men who'd taught him to fight, to sail, to survive. Now they looked at him with cold eyes, their loyalty to his father overriding any affection they'd once held for him. "It seems our father's been planning this for some time," Bjorn said quietly. "Eric's return is no accident. He means to replace me, the son who disappointed him with one who never will." Ethelflaed touched his arm. "There's more to this than we know. Look at the way they're positioned. They're not just here to capture us." She was right. The ships had taken formation not for battle, but for ceremony. On their decks, Bjorn could see ritual objects being prepared, things used in the most solemn of Norse rites. "The coin," he said suddenly, understanding dawning. "It's not just a tracker, it's an offering coin, the kind used in blood sacrifices." Horror filled Ethelflaed's face. "They mean to sacrifice us, to their gods." "Not us," Bjorn corrected grimly. "You. They'll make your death a ritual offering to cleanse the shame of my betrayal, and I'll be forced to watch before meeting my own end." Eric's voice carried across the water again. "Time grows short, brother. Father's patience is not endless, and the gods demand their due." Bjorn's mind raced. The betrayer's coin meant someone close had been marking their path, someone who knew the secret ways of the fjord. But who? And then he remembered his mother's worried eyes the night before the raid, her cryptic warnings. "She knew," he whispered. "My mother saw this coming, the drum, the hidden paths. She was preparing me for this moment." Understanding passed between them. The previous night's ritual hadn't just been about bridging their faiths. It had been preparation for what was to come. "Your mother's drum," Ethelflaed said quietly. "It shows the spirit paths, doesn't it? Ways that can't be followed by normal means?" Bjorn nodded slowly. "But to attempt such a thing, it would be dangerous. The spirit world is not meant for physical travel. More dangerous than what awaits us here." The betrayer's coin felt heavy in Bjorn's hand. All his life, he'd tried to be the son his father wanted, never quite succeeding. Now he understood why. He'd been following the wrong parent's path all along. "Brother!" Eric called once more. "This is your last chance. Don't throw away everything for some Saxon spellweaver." Bjorn met Ethelflaed's eyes. In them, he saw not fear but determination, the same strength that had made her stand against raiders to protect her patience. "Trust me?" he asked. "Always," she replied, and the simplicity of her answer moved him more than any oath could have. He took out his mother's drum, its symbols seeming to shift in the fog. The betrayer's coin he cast into the water, let the treachery sink with it. "Then hold tight," he said, raising the drum. "We're about to walk between worlds." As Eric's men prepared to board their small boat, Bjorn began to play the drum's most sacred rhythm. Ethelflaed added her own prayers, Christian words twining, with Norse magic in the mist. The fog thickened impossibly, taking on shapes that had no place in the mortal world. The last thing they heard was Eric's cry of rage, as their boat seemed to dissolve into the mist itself, leaving behind a world where betrayal wore a brother's face, and taking them into realms where only the bravest or most desperate souls dared to tread. The betrayer's coin spun down through dark waters, its silver surface catching the last light before disappearing into the depths. Above, the fog closed like a door between worlds, and the hunt for the Jarl's son and his Saxon healer entered a realm where normal weapons and normal tracking would mean nothing at all. The spirit world released them into a hidden grotto, there, small boat materializing through mist that shimmered like molten silver. Ethelflaed slumped against Bjorn, drained by their passage between realms. The drum's rhythm still echoed in their bones, its magic leaving them both shaken but alive. As their vision cleared, they saw they weren't alone. A figure stood on the rocky shore, tall, grey-haired, wrapped in a wolfskin cloak. Bjorn's breath caught. "Mother?" Astrid the Wise stepped forward, the golden oath ring at her throat catching the dim light. Its surface was marked with runes of binding, sealed with the blood of ancient Jarls. "I've been waiting," she said softly. "The stones spoke of your coming." "You knew," Bjorn said, helping Ethelflaed from the boat. "About Eirik, about fathers, plans, all of it. I saw." Astrid's eyes were heavy with knowledge no mother should have to bear. "The Norns showed me what would come if I remained silent, and what might be if I chose to act." Her gaze fell on Ethelflaed. "They showed me you as well, Saxon healer, the one who would help my son break old bonds to forge stronger ones." Ethelflaed straightened despite her exhaustion. "You left us, the coin to find. You wanted us to know we were being tracked." Astrid nodded, removing the oath ring from her throat. "Some oaths bind, others strangle." She held out the ring. "This has bound our people to the old ways for generations, ways that once protected us, but now hold us back from what we must become." Bjorn recognized the ring. It had been used to seal every important oath in their settlement since his grandfather's time. The oath ring of the Jarls. Breaking it would mean freedom, his mother finished. Freedom to choose a new path, but such choices come with a price. She pressed the ring into their joined hands. In the grotto's strange light, the runes seemed to move, ancient promises wrestling with new possibilities. "Your father has invoked the old oaths," Astrid continued. "Every warrior who ever swore on this ring is now bound to hunt you. But oaths can be rewritten if one has the courage and the right allies." "Allies?" Ethelflaed asked. "Who would stand with us against such ancient bindings?" A smile touched Astrid's lips. "There are others who see the need for change. Other settlements, other Jarls who tire of endless raids and blood feuds. They await a sign that new ways are possible." She turned to her son. "You were never meant to be your father's copy, Bjorn. The gods gave you a different strength, the strength to break chains rather than forge them." Bjorn held the oath ring, feeling its weight, not just metal, but centuries of tradition. "What must we do?" "First, survive." Astrid's voice held both love and steel. "Your brother's men will not be far behind, even in these hidden ways. Then, seek out those I've prepared to help you. They'll know you by the broken ring." She pressed something else into Ethelflaed's hands, a small pouch of herbs. "These grow only in the spirit groves. Use them wisely. They heal more than just the body." Voices echoed distantly through the mist. Searching parties drawing closer. Astrid's head snapped up. "You must go. Follow the path of the white stones. Trust nothing else in these realms. The spirits here are ancient and not all are kind." "Come with us," Bjorn urged, but his mother shook her head. "My part is here, maintaining the illusion that all is normal. Your father suspects me, but he cannot act without proof." She touched his cheek. "You have your path now, my son. I have mine." She turned to Ethelflaed. "Take care of him. He has his father's pride and his mother's stubborn heart." "I will," Ethelflaed promised. And in that moment something passed between the two women, an understanding deeper than words. Astrid stepped back as mist began to curl around her feet. Break the ring when you find true allies. Its power will bind new oaths in place of old ones. But choose carefully. Such bonds, once made, cannot be undone. She began to fade into the mist. Remember, the white stones. Trust nothing else. And Bjorn, her voice grew distant. You were always the son I hoped you'd be. Then she was gone, leaving them alone with the oath ring, the spirit herbs, and the sound of pursuit growing ever closer. Ethelflaed touched the ring in Bjorn's hands. Your mother risks everything for this chance. For us, he corrected quietly, for what we might represent. He lifted the ring, studying the runes that had bound his people for generations. A new way forward, not Saxon, not Viking, but something else entirely. They found the white stones, a path leading deeper into realms where the normal rules of the world grew thin. As they prepared to follow it, Bjorn took one last look at the grotto where his mother had made her choice. The oath ring hung heavy at his belt, its ancient bindings, waiting to be broken, its power ready to forge new connections. But first, they had to survive long enough to find those who would stand with them, those willing to imagine a world where old enemies could become new allies and ancient oaths could give way to deeper truths. The white stone path led them through mist-shrouded realms where time seemed to flow like water, sometimes swift, sometimes barely moving at all. During one of their brief rests, Ethelflaed withdrew a silver pendant from beneath her tunic, a delicate Saxon cross intertwined with patterns that spoke of older, pre-Christian traditions. My mother wore this, she said, watching it catch. What little light filtered through the spirit mist. And her mother before her. They said it was blessed by Saint Cuthbert himself, though the patterns are older than any Christian blessing. Bjorn studied the pendant's intricate design. The spiral pattern, we have similar ones in our art. The eternal cycle of life and death. Yes, Ethelflaed's fingers traced the familiar curves. When I was young, I asked my mother why we kept the old patterns if we were Christian now. She said wisdom doesn't become false just because new truth comes along. A distant howl echoed through the mist. Whether wolf or spirit, neither could tell. They huddled closer in their small shelter, the oath ring and pendant lying side by. Side like a prophecy neither fully understood. I received word before the raid, Ethelflaed said quietly. My brother Edwin survived. He's rallying Saxon forces, swearing vengeance against all Vikings. Her voice cracked slightly. If he knew I traveled with you, he'd name you traitor, Bjorn finished. As my people have named me. More than that. She clutched the pendant, tightly. He'd say I betrayed our mother's memory, everything our family stood for. She looked at Bjorn, conflict clear in her eyes. How can this be right when it feels like I'm turning my back on everything I am? Bjorn was quiet for a moment, choosing his words carefully. Perhaps we don't have to stop being who we are to become something new, like your pendant, Christian and pagan, existing together in one truth. A cold wind swept through their shelter, carrying whispers in ancient tongues. Ethelflaed shivered, but not from the cold. I hear them sometimes, in this place between worlds, the voices of my ancestors. They speak of blood debts and ancient wrongs. And what do they say about healing those wrongs? She paused, listening to something only she could hear. They speak of cycles, how violence begets violence unless someone finds the courage to break the pattern. She looked down at her pendant. Like these spirals, they can trap us in endless repetition or lead us to a new center. Bjorn touched the oath ring at his belt. My mother said something similar about oaths. How they can bind us to the past or help us build a different future. He met her eyes. Your healing knowledge, it comes from both Christian and pagan sources, doesn't it? Yes, she admitted. The prayers work alongside the ancient herb lore. Neither diminishes the other. Then perhaps that's our answer. Not to abandon who we are, but to weave something new from the best of both worlds. The mist around them thickened, taking shapes that might have been figures from both their pasts. Saxon warriors and Norse raiders, priests and vulvas, all watching, all waiting to see what choice they would make. Ethelflaed lifted her pendant, letting it dangle between them. In the strange light, the Christian cross seemed to dance with the pagan spirals, neither overwhelming the other. My mother used to say that healing isn't just about mending flesh, it's about mending the tears in the world itself. Then perhaps that's what we're meant to do, Bjorn said softly. Not just survive, but heal something larger than ourselves. She tucked the pendant away, but its presence remained between them like a promise. They were both changing, becoming something their peoples had no name for yet. And perhaps that was as it should be. New paths required new words to describe them. The howling came again, closer now. Whether they're pursuers or the spirits of this realm, it meant they needed to move. As they gathered their few possessions, Ethelflaed touched the pendant one last time, feeling the combined strength of Christian faith and pagan wisdom flowing through its silver forms. They were not betraying their pasts, she realized, but building a bridge to a future that needed both old wisdom and new understanding. Like the pendant itself, they would carry forward the best of what came before while forging ahead into unknown territories of the heart. The spirit realm finally released them into a physical fjord at dawn, their small boat emerging through thinning mist into a hidden cove. There, waiting on the shore as Astrid had promised, stood a group of warriors, neither fully Viking nor Saxon, their weapons and dress showing influence from both cultures. Their leader stepped forward, a ceremonial sword held point down before him. Its blade bore inscriptions in both Norse runes and Latin script, speaking to a heritage that bridged both worlds. "I am Halfdan the Crossed," he said, his accent neither fully Norse nor Saxon. "Astrid the Wise spoke of your coming." Bjorn and Ethelflaed stepped from their boat cautiously. Young warriors flanked Halfdan, watching the newcomers with mixture of curiosity and suspicion. "Show us the ring," Halfdan commanded. Bjorn produced the oath ring, its ancient surface gleaming. Halfdan nodded, then offered the ceremonial sword in return. "This blade has touched no blood," he explained. "It serves only to bind oaths and settle disputes through wisdom rather than violence. A warrior's sword that doesn't wage war." Ethelflaed asked, studying the blade's unusual markings. "Is that not what we all seek?" Halfdan's scarred face broke into an unexpected smile. "A way to be strong without feeding the endless cycle of revenge?" He led them to a concealed settlement, where Saxons and Vikings lived side by side. Children played together, speaking a mixed tongue that borrowed from both languages. Women worked at looms that combined Norse and Saxon patterns. Men trained together, sharing fighting techniques from both cultures. "We are the forgotten ones," Halfdan explained. "Those who chose love over hate, peace over vengeance. Both our peoples call us traitors, yet here we have built something new." He brought them to a training ground where young warriors practiced. "But peace must be defended." He continued, "We must be strong enough to protect this new way of life. Will you show us what you bring to our cause?" Bjorn stepped forward first, taking up a practice sword. 3 of Halfdan's best warriors challenged him in turn. But instead of the brute force his father had always demanded, Bjorn employed the thoughtful strategy his mother had taught him, combining Viking strength with Saxon precision. "Good," Halfdan nodded. "You fight with both mind and heart." He turned to Ethelflaed. "And you, healer, what do you bring?" Without hesitation, she stepped into the training circle. "A warrior needs more than just skill with a blade," she said, her voice carrying across the yard. "They need to understand the body's weaknesses and strengths." She proceeded to demonstrate pressure points and vulnerable areas, showing how a smaller fighter could defend against a larger one. The young warriors watched intently as she combined her healer's knowledge with basic combat moves. "The body's flows are like rivers," she explained, using concepts that both cultures understood. "Block them right, and even the strongest warrior falls." Throughout the day, they both proved their worth, not through dominance, but through teaching and learning. Bjorn shared Norse tactics while learning Saxon shield formations. Aethelflaed taught healing techniques while learning Norse battle songs. As sunset approached, Halfdan called them all together. The ceremonial sword was planted in the ground at the center of their gathering. "You bear Astrid's oath ring," he said solemnly, "and you have shown wisdom as well as strength. But leading these people requires more than skill. It requires vision. What future do you see for us?" Bjorn and Aethelflaed exchanged glances. Then Aethelflaed stepped forward, touching the ceremonial sword's hilt. "I see a future where strength serves healing, where ancient wisdom guides new growth." Bjorn joined her, his hand above hers on the sword, "where children learn both people's stories and old enemies become family." Halfdan nodded slowly. "Then swear it on this blade that has never known blood. Swear to build this future not just for yourselves, but for all who would follow a different path." Their oath, spoken in both languages, rang across the training ground as the sun set. The ceremonial sword seemed to glow in the fading light, its dual inscriptions a testament to the possibility of unity and difference. They had passed the test of combat, but more importantly, they had shown the wisdom to see beyond it. As darkness fell, the ceremonial sword was returned to its place of honor, and 2 more warriors joined the ranks of those who dared to dream of a different way. In the quiet hours before dawn, Bjorn sat alone by the settlement's sacred grove, carefully carving a piece of birchwood. His knife moved with practiced precision, combining Norse knotwork with Saxon crosses in an intricate pattern that spoke of both their worlds. The traditional love token was taking shape beneath his hands, though he'd never seen one quite like this before. "You're up early." Aethelflaed's voice came softly from behind him. She had taken to moving as quietly as a vulva these days, blending Saxon grace with Norse stealth. Bjorn quickly tucked the unfinished token into his tunic, but not before she caught a glimpse of it. A slight smile touched her lips, though she pretended not to have seen. "I've been thinking about what Halfdan said," she said, settling beside him, "about building something new." Her shoulder brushed his, a touch that sent warmth through them both despite the morning chill. "And what do you think?" he asked, acutely aware of her presence. "I think—" She paused, choosing her words carefully. "I think some things are worth building even if no one has built them before." Her hand found his in the growing light. "Even if everyone says they cannot be built." Bjorn interlaced their fingers, marveling at how natural it felt now. Like a love between Saxon and Viking. "Like a truth bigger than Saxon or Viking," she corrected gently. He withdrew the half-finished token, letting her see it properly. The wood seemed to come alive in the dawn light, its patterns flowing into each other like their 2 cultures had begun to flow together. "In our tradition," he explained, "such tokens are carved with runes of binding and protection. But I've added your crosses too, and the spirals that both our peoples share." Aethelflaed traced the patterns with her free hand. "It's beautiful," she whispered, "like a prayer, written in both our languages at once." "I'm not finished yet," he said. "It needs herbs pressed into the grooves, healing herbs like the ones you use, to show that love must heal as well as bind." She reached for her herb bundle, selecting sprigs of rosemary and thyme. "For remembrance and courage," she said, pressing them into the carved channels. The fresh herbs released their scent, mingling with the sweet smell of newly cut birch. "My father would say I've gone mad," Bjorn said softly, "carving Christian symbols into a Norse love token." "And my brother would say I've been bewitched," Aethelflaed replied, "accepting a pagan blessing." She met his eyes. "But what do you say?" "I say that love creates its own truth." He worked the herbs deeper into the wood. "Like this token, neither fully one thing nor the other, but something new and true in itself." They sat in comfortable silence as he finished the carving, adding the final touches as the sun rose fully above the fjord. The completed token held both their stories, Norse strength and Saxon grace, pagan magic and Christian faith, all bound together in circles of endless knots. "There's an old saying among our healers," Aethelflaed said, as Bjorn added the final herbs, "that the strongest medicines come from mixing things that shouldn't go together." She smiled. "Perhaps love is the same way. Perhaps that's why the gods, or your god, brought us together, Bjorn suggested, to heal something larger than ourselves. He pressed the finished token into her hands. It was warm from his work, alive with the scent of herbs and fresh wood. I give you my heart's truth, he said in Norse, then repeated it in Saxon. Bound in neither one world nor the other, but in the space between, where new things can grow. Ethelflaed held the token to her heart, then spoke the traditional Saxon acceptance, but added Norse words of her own. I take your truth into my keeping, and give you mine in return. May our love be like these patterns, endless, protecting, healing. As if in blessing, the morning sun broke through the trees, illuminating the token's patterns. For a moment, it seemed to glow with an inner light, the herbs gleaming like precious stones in their wooden channels. They sealed their exchange with a kiss that belonged to no single tradition, but was entirely their own. Around them, the sacred. Grove stood witness, its ancient spirits watching as something new took root in soil watered by both Saxon tears and Viking blood. The love token would hang between them, a symbol of possibility, proof that hearts could bridge the gaps that swords had carved, that love could speak in many tongues yet tell a single truth. In its carved faces, two cultures met and merged, creating something that had never existed before. And perhaps that was the greatest magic of all. A scout burst into the settlement at midday, his breath coming in ragged gasps. Above the great hall, the settlement's war banner snapped in the rising wind, a piece of cloth that told their whole story. One side bore the ravens of Odin, the other the cross of Christianity, sewn together into a single standard that defied the old divisions. Ships, the scout reported. Many ships. Your father's forces approach from the north, while Saxon warriors come from the south. He turned to Ethelflaed, led by your brother Edwin. Bjorn and Ethelflaed exchanged glances. The moment they had dreaded had finally arrived, their separate worlds converging to tear apart the new one they had helped to build. Halfdan called the settlement's leaders together in the great hall, the war banner casting its mixed shadows across their faces. We knew this day would come, he said gravely, when we would have to defend our choice to live differently. Through the hall's open doors, they could see mothers gathering children, warriors checking weapons, and healers preparing their supplies. The life they had built here, this beautiful blend of Saxon and Norse, faced its greatest test. My father will have invoked the ancient war rites, Bjorn said, his hand straying to the oath ring at his belt. Every warrior who ever swore fealty to him will be bound by blood oath to fight. And my brother, Ethelflaed added, touching the love token at her throat, he leads those who see any peace with Vikings as treachery against our people. Halfdan unrolled a map across the great table. We are outnumbered, he said simply. But we have advantages they don't expect. We know both styles of warfare. We fight not for glory or vengeance, but for our homes, our children, our future. The war banner's shadow seemed to writhe across the map as the wind gusted stronger. Someone had written words along its hem in both Norse runes and Saxon script. Truth fears no border. We cannot win by force alone, Ethelflaed said, her healer's wisdom rising to meet the warrior's challenge. We must show them another way. Bjorn nodded slowly. The oath ring, it binds the old oaths, but it can forge new ones. If we could make them see what we've built here, they don't want to see, one of the settlement's elders interrupted. They come to destroy what they don't understand. Then we make them understand, Ethelflaed insisted. We show them our children who speak both tongues, our warriors who fight with both styles, our healers who use both traditions. The war banner cracked like thunder in a sudden gust. All eyes turned to it, this symbol of their defiance and their hope. We fight if we must, Bjorn said firmly, but we also prepare to heal. That's what makes us different. That's what makes us stronger. Plans were made as the afternoon waned. Defenses were arranged using both Saxon shield walls and Viking shield castles. Escape routes were planned for the children. Healing stations were prepared using both people's methods. Through it all, the war banner flew above them, its dual nature a reminder of everything they fought to preserve. Like the love token, like the oath ring, it spoke of possibility, of a world where old enemies could become something new together. As dusk approached, Bjorn and Æthelflæd stood together on the settlement's walls, watching the banner stream against the darkening sky. Tomorrow would bring war, but tonight, whatever comes, Æthelflæd said softly, we've proven it's possible. Saxon and Viking, living and loving as one people. Bjorn took her hand, feeling the rough calluses of healing work against his warrior's scars. Then let them come, he said. Let them see what love can build, even in the shadow of hate. Above them, the war banner snapped and swayed, its ravens and crosses dancing together in the growing storm. Tomorrow it would fly over battle, but tonight it flew over hope. Hope for a future where the children of warriors could learn to be healers, and the children of healers could learn to be strong. Dawn broke cold and clear over the fjord. In the settlement's great hall, Halfdan presented Bjorn and Æthelflæd with an ancient treasure, a bronze ring larger than the oath ring, its surface worn smooth by generations of hands. The peace ring, he explained, used in the old days when Vikings and Saxons sought truce. Both sides would grasp it during parley, bound by its power to speak truth and seek understanding. Æthelflæd studied the ring's weathered surface. I've heard tales of such things. Before the raids began, there was trade between our peoples. Agreements sealed with rings like this. Yes, Bjorn said softly, before blood feuds and revenge became our only songs. From outside came the distant sound of horns, Norse war calls from the north, Saxon signals from the south. Their time was running short. We must try to reach them, Æthelflæd said, taking up the peace ring. Before steel is drawn and words become impossible. They mounted horses. Bjorn carrying his father's oath ring, Æthelflæd holding the peace ring. Both waited with history and hope. A small honor guard accompanied them, bearing the settlement's war banner with its merged symbols. They rode first to the Saxon lines, where Edwin's forces had taken position on the southern heights. Æthelflæd's brother sat astride his horse, his face hardening at the sight of her with the Vikings. "Sister," he called, voice cold as winter frost, "have they bewitched you so completely that you now ride against your own blood?" "I ride for peace, brother." She held up the peace ring. "Remember the stories grandmother told, of times when our peoples traded instead of fought? Children's tales," Edwin spat, "before we learned the truth of Viking treachery. Look around you." Æthelflæd gestured to the settlement below. "See what we've built here. Saxon and Norse children playing together, learning both tongues, healers sharing wisdom from both traditions." "Abomination," one of Edwin's priests declared. "Christian souls corrupted by pagan ways." Bjorn spoke then, his Saxon words careful but clear. "Your sister has not abandoned her faith. She has helped us find our own path to truth." But Edwin's face showed no softening. "Save your foreign tongue, Northman. We come to cleanse this taint from Saxon lands." They rode next to the Norse lines, where Eric Bloodaxe's raven's banner flew beside Eric's wolf standard. The Jarl's face was like iron as his eldest son approached. "Father," Bjorn called in Norse, "let us speak with the peace ring, as our ancestors did." "You dare speak of ancestry?" Eric's voice thundered across the field. "You who betrayed everything our people stand for?" "I found something worth more than raids and plunder." Bjorn held up the oath ring. "The strength to build rather than destroy, the courage to love rather than hate." Eric laughed harshly. "Pretty words from a man who abandoned his place for a Saxon witch." "She is a healer," Bjorn corrected, steel entering his voice. "And she has taught us ways to grow stronger without feeding on others' pain." But his father's eyes were cold. "No son of mine makes peace with Saxon dogs." They rode back to the settlement as the sun climbed higher. The peace ring felt heavy in Æthelflæd's hands, its ancient power unable to bridge the chasms of hate that years of war had carved. "They won't listen," she said softly. "No," Bjorn agreed. "They are too bound by old songs of glory and vengeance. They cannot hear the new music we've made here." In the settlement, their people waited, not just warriors now, but families who had built lives in this space between worlds. The peace ring and oath ring lay side by side on the great hall's table, symbols of what was and what could be. Then, "We fight," Halfdan said simply, "not for victory, but for the right to live as we choose." The war horns sounded again, closer now. Battle was coming, but they had tried for peace. They had shown another way was possible, even if the old world wasn't ready to see it. Above them, the war banner flew steady now, as if gathering strength for the storm to come. Sometimes, they realized, peace had to be defended with steel before. It could be sealed with rings. The clash of steel on steel echoed through the fjord as three forces met in battle. At the center of the maelstrom, the settlement's defenders fought with unprecedented unity. Saxon shield walls protecting Norse berserkers, Viking shield castles sheltering Saxon archers. Above them flew their war banner, and at its foot stood Bjorn and Æthelflæd, fighting back to back. In Bjorn's hands, his grandfather's sword moved with deadly grace. But unlike the raiders of old, each stroke was measured, defensive rather than destroying. Beside him, Æthelflæd wielded a Saxon blade with a healer's precision, striking to disable rather than kill. Through the chaos of battle, Bjorn caught sight of something glinting in his father's hands. The ancient crown of their people, its bronze surface marked with the wolves of their clan. Eric Bloodaxe held it high, a symbol of the old ways he fought to preserve. Then, from the Saxon lines, Edwin raised his own symbol of authority, a silver circlet blessed by Christian priests, marking him as a defender of his faith. Two crowns, two traditions, both demanding blood for their truth. But Æthelflæd had seen something else. In the settlement's great hall lay a third crown, one they had forged in secret. Bronze and silver merged together, Norse wolves running alongside. Saxon crosses. It waited for the moment when old powers could become something new. "The oath ring," she called to Bjorn over the clash of battle. "Remember what your mother said. Its power can forge new bonds." Understanding flashed between them. While their people held the lines, they fought their way toward the great hall. Behind them, they heard Eirik's war cry as he led a charge against their position. Inside the hall, Æthelflæd grabbed the merged crown while Bjorn took up the oath ring. They emerged to find both armies surging toward them, Eric and Edwin at the fore, each seeking to end this conflict with a decisive blow. Bjorn lifted the oath ring high. "By the power of ancient oaths," his voice carried across the battlefield, "I call for judgment by combat." The fighting slowed, then stopped. Such a challenge could not be ignored without losing all honor. "Brother against brother," Eric stepped forward, grinning savagely. "As it should be," but Æthelflæd moved to Bjorn's side, the merged crown in her hands. "No! Together we stand. Together we fight. That is what we defend here, the strength of unity over the weakness of division." A murmur ran through both armies. Never had a woman stood for combat judgment. Never had Saxon and Norse fought as one in such a trial. Eric's face darkened with rage. "You dishonor all our traditions." "We honor something greater," Bjorn replied. "The tradition of peace that came before raids, the wisdom that taught us to trade instead of steal." Edwin urged his horse forward. "Then let us end this. Sister, step aside. This is no place for..." "For what?" Æthelflæd's voice rang clear. "For a healer? For a woman? I have learned to fight as you have learned to heal, brother. Or did you think I didn't see you binding wounds between battles?" Uncertainty flickered across Edwin's face. Around them, warriors from both sides lowered their weapons, sensing that something momentous was unfolding. "We challenge you both," Bjorn declared. "Father, brother, face us together. Let us show you what Saxon wisdom and Norse strength can achieve when united." The battle that followed would be sung of in both languages for generations. 4 warriors, in the circle of judgment, but fighting like none had seen before. Bjorn and Æthelflæd moved as one, her precision complementing his power, his strength protecting her speed. When Eric's rage left him open, it was Æthelflæd's healer's knowledge that found the nerve point to drop his sword. When Edwin's skill nearly broke through, it was Bjorn's shield that turned his blade. The merged crown caught the sun as they fought, its unified design a testament to what they defended. The oath ring hummed with power, sensing the forging of new bonds in the heat of battle. Finally, both Eric and Edwin fell, not dead or even badly wounded, but decisively defeated. In the silence that followed, Æthelflæd lifted the merged crown while Bjorn raised the oath ring. "This is our truth," they declared together, first in Norse, then in Saxon. Not the victory of one people over another, but the triumph of unity over division. To everyone's amazement, Eric began to laugh, not his usual warrior's roar, but something older and wiser. "I see your mother in you, son," he said softly. "She always said the greatest strength lies in knowing when to set down the sword." Edwin rose slowly, looking at his sister with new eyes. "Grandmother's stories," he said, "about the old peace. Perhaps they weren't just tales after all." The merged crown gleamed in the sunlight, its unified design now a symbol not just of hope, but of victory, not over enemies, but over the hatred that had divided them for so long. In the great hall, as healers tended the wounded from both sides, something remarkable was taking shape. Saxon and Norse women worked side by side at a great loom, their fingers weaving together threads of gold and silver, creating a tapestry that told the story of this day, not in the language of battle and glory, but in symbols of transformation and unity. Æthelflæd stood before the growing tapestry, its patterns echoing the merged crown she now wore alongside Bjorn. Her brother Edwin watched the weaver's work, his expression thoughtful as he recognized Saxon crosses flowing into Norse knotwork, creating patterns that spoke in both tongues, yet belonged to neither. "You were right," he said softly, "about the old stories, about there being another way." Across the hall, Eric Bloodaxe sat with his sons, both of them now, as Astrid tended, his wounds with a mixture of Saxon herbs and Norse healing chants. The old Jarl's eyes never left the unity tapestry growing on the loom. "Your mother," he said to Bjorn, "she saw this day in her visions. I was too proud to listen." Bjorn knelt beside his father, taking his weathered hand. "And I was too afraid to believe until Æthelflæd showed me that strength can heal as well as harm." The unity tapestry seemed to shimmer in the hall's firelight, its patterns telling many stories at once. Here, a Viking longship sailed alongside a Saxon trading vessel. There, Christian priests and Norse velour shared wisdom beneath the world tree. At its center, two figures stood back to back, sword and staff combined in defense of something new. Halfdan moved among the gathered warriors, Saxon and Norse alike, sharing mead and stories. "Look well," he called out, gesturing to the tapestry. "This is how peace is woven. Not by erasing our differences, but by learning to see the pattern they make together." Æthelflæd's healers worked alongside Norse medicine women, each learning from the other's methods. Warriors who had faced each other in battle now compared techniques, finding respect in their differences and strength in their similarities. "The children," Eric said suddenly, watching as little ones emerged from hiding to play among the warriors. "They already speak both tongues, don't they? They don't see Saxon or Norse, they just see people. The future," Astrid smiled, her wise eyes shining. "They weave it without even knowing, these little ones. Like the tapestry, each thread strengthens the whole." As night fell, the unity tapestry neared completion. Its border combined Saxon manuscript illumination with Norse dragon designs, creating something entirely new, yet deeply rooted in both traditions. At its heart, the merged crown and oath ring were depicted not as symbols of power, but as bridges between worlds. Edwin stood before it, his sister at his side. "We'll need more looms," he said thoughtfully. "More tapestries like this, to show others what's possible. And more crowns," Eric added, joining them. "Not for power, but for remembrance, to show that old enemies can become family." Outside, the war banner that had flown over battle now flew over celebration as Norse bards and Saxon poets began crafting new songs together, songs that spoke of bridges instead of battles, of healing instead of hatred. The Unity tapestry would hang in the great hall for generations, its story growing clearer with time. Not a tale of conquest or submission, but of transformation, of people brave enough to weave a new pattern from the threads of ancient traditions. As the night deepened, Bjorn and Ethelflaed stood before the completed tapestry, their merged crown catching the firelight like the dawn of a new age. Around them, their people, no longer Saxon or Norse, but something wonderfully, powerfully new, began the work of building that dawn into reality. Years later, travelers coming to the flourishing settlement would pause before a massive stone, standing at the fjord's entrance. Its surface, carved with infinite care, bore the story of a Saxon healer and a Viking heir who dared to dream of peace. The runes and Latin letters intertwined like lovers' hands, each script making the other more beautiful for its presence. The combined saga stone, as it came to be known, stood as witness to what grew from that first defiant choice. Children of both peoples would trace its carvings with their fingers, learning how Bjorn and Ethelflaed's love sparked a transformation that spread like spring flowers after winter's thaw. Their legacy lived on in more than just stone. It bloomed in the gardens where Saxon herbs grew alongside Norse medicinal plants, in the great halls where both crosses and hammer signs blessed the harvest feasts, in the songs that praised neither war nor revenge, but the courage to choose a different path. And in the heart of the settlement, where the Unity tapestry still hung bright and true, the merged crown rested on a bed of flowers, not worn now, but preserved as a reminder that love could forge something stronger than hate, that wisdom could build bridges across the deepest divides. Some said that on quiet evenings, when the fjord mist rolled in just so, you could still hear their story whispered on the wind, not in Saxon, not in Norse, but in the shared language of hope they helped create.